Welcome to GenZ Talks. This is your host, Ryan Solomon, the head of community and content at Entre. At Entre, we built a social network for entrepreneurs, investors, creators, and freelancers. Every week, this show is recorded live on Entre, and I get to interview the most ambitious and young entrepreneurs and investors from around the world. And if you'd like to be a part of our next episode of GenZ Talks, maybe even get to come up on stage and ask a question, make sure to head over to joinentre.com and register for GenZ Talks. Now that that's out of the way, it's time to kick things off. Let's go. For tonight, we're talking about SAAS. So today we have Graham Sabin and we have Ben Sears. I'm going to let them kind of introduce themselves, share who they are, where they're from, and what they're building. So Graham, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure thing. First of all, I guess thanks for having us, Oli. Excited to come in here and talk. Excited to hear what Ben has to say. But as for me, I am a sophomore in college right now. I'm over at Gonzaga University, which is in Spokane, Washington. And during my freshman year, I started a company called Pondr. And we've kind of made a couple shifts throughout the year, just bigger pivots, which I'll talk about later, I'm sure. But at the core of it, we wanted to help e-commerce companies figure out how to make their products better and do so by taking advantage of data that they already had. So what we do is analyze online reviews and format them into a way that helps a company say, here's what my users want to see. Here's how I can make my product better, and in turn, make more customers happy. And so I'm pretty new at all this. I'm a first-time founder, so don't take everything I have without a grain of salt. But I'm just excited to be here. So thanks.
Absolutely. Over to Ben.
Yeah, so my name is Ben Sears. I'm one of the founders of Billflow, and I wear way too many hats that I feel comfortable with, including marketing, sales, tech stuff. You name it, I've probably done it. So we've been around for close to 5 years now, with lots of pivots in between. I think overall, to give a nutshell of what we do is think of on any sort of application, you have like the billing page where you go to enter your credit card or change plan or download your invoices. What we do is we make it so you can basically not have to develop any of that into your application. You can just kind of plug and play, use billing pages for your customers to self-service and manage their subscriptions.
Really awesome stuff. It's going to be really great that we have Ben, since you're a little further along in your journey than Graham is. So we'll actually have two interesting perspectives that I'm really excited for. And are you also a first-time founder, Ben, or are you multiple?
I would consider myself a first-time founder. Yeah. I have had other ventures in the past, but nothing I really committed seriously to.
Got it. All right. Awesome. Well, first thing I want to kick off and ask about is product development. Mainly because I think finding technical talent is probably one of the biggest struggles with founders. I meet so many founders that always ask me, how do you find technical talent? I'm asking someone myself who is non-technical. So Ben, I'm going to ask you first and we'll go back to Graham. And know that you're obviously technical since you're the CTO. What was that process like for you and your team early on when you guys were originally bootstrapping? And how did you bring on more technical talent?
So we were actually, this is not a good question for me because our team started off very technical. So we were a very technically founded team. There's 5 of us founders and 4 of us have technical backgrounds. So it took a very long time before we actually needed to scale up our tech team. I mean, when we did actually end up needing to do it, we started using, there was a company called TalkTal, where you can basically get tech consultants that you can pay kind of part-time, full-time, depending on your needs. We use them for bug fixes and minor features.
That is super handy to have, having a fully technical team.
Well, on the other side of the coin, though, we really did struggle extremely with the marketing side and the non-technical sides of the business. That's really why we took so long to actually kind of get to where we are. One of the reasons was we just kind of sucked at marketing.
fair point. So it's having that balance is really important.
Absolutely.
And also to the point that you mentioned on TopTal, for anyone who is an Entre Pro member, we actually do have a deal with TopTal where you spend $2,000, you get $2,000 back in credit, which is probably one of our best deals in my opinion. So if you are looking for technical talent, I definitely suggest checking out TopTal. And I'm going to pass it to Graham.
Yeah. So I'm kind of in the same boat as Ben here on this question. So in college right now, I'm studying computer engineering. And so in that sense, I'm pretty technical, as in I know enough, but on the team, I'm non-technical just because I'm surrounded by a lot of people who have been coding for a very long time that are much more skilled than I am. And so I went to a high school that had like a lot of people that ended up getting into coding and got very good at it. So when it came to finding technical talent, first of all, two of my co-founders are technical and we're technical on the team. And then being in computer engineering and having my co-founders in computer science and that kind of thing, it was very easy to find people who could get hooked to what we were doing, get excited about it, and then treat it as a way to get experience with a real life project and with people who had already started it and just could tell them, hey, here's what you need to build and throw in your ideas if you've got them. So in that sense, we got very lucky. But I will say, as for product development, that having a very technical team also came at a little bit of a price because we focused a lot more on build and then talk to customers about what to change rather than go out and talk to the people who we think should be our customers before we build. And so that's kind of a big shift that we're going through right now, is changing that mindset from just build and launch into actually having interviews and conversations beforehand to make sure we're building the right things.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And that's been part of my role as head of community too, and talking with those early adopters. And to the point, if you have any feedback, please send it my way. And one other thing I did want to mention is we do have the in-room chat if you are on web. So if you do want to introduce yourself, please make sure to. And then I kind of actually wanted to jump into that a little bit. But first I wanted to ask, whenever it comes to managing technical talent, I think that's like a whole different role. I think one thing, because you can be technical, but whenever you start to scale and you're managing your technical team as a whole, what kind of advice would you give to an early stage founder to keep everything, all your ducks in a row and everything getting done on time? Especially whenever bugs are coming up, you're getting user feedback, stuff like that. What have you guys learned about managing your technical teams and also like having the correct sprints? Ben, you want to go for it? Oh, Graham?
Yeah, I want to hear from Ben first, just to see what he has to say.
Yeah. So it really, once you get to a certain size, when you're very small, like maybe one or two people on your dev team, you really don't need very much. You can pretty much like have a to-do list and then you can assign tickets to it. And this works really well, especially in the build stage. Once you actually have customers and issues, you really have to start prioritizing no matter what, based on really what the rule of thumb I do is kind of purely based on customer pain. So the painful things for the customers are going to be the things that you got to fix first. And when it comes to feature development as well, it's kind of, you have to balance between what features are you going to be able to market and bring in new customers with, and what features are going to relieve customer pain and make the product better to use for them. And generally I err on the side of let's, make the product better, but there are cases where you need to pivot completely and build a whole new set of features. So it's really a long-winded way to say, just prioritize things based on what's going to have the biggest impact for your business. And as far as organizing, just, I generally err on the side of simplicity. So basically to-do lists with time estimates. And we have basic sprint schedule, but it's nothing agile. I would not consider what we do agile in the slightest.
Got you. Now that makes a lot of sense. When you have a small team, it's pretty easy to keep things organized. And Graham, for you and your team?
Yeah. So we kind of started off, we started off very small, and it was that kind of, here we know generally what we want to build. Everybody's going to have input. So let's just put out the main tasks we want to do and leave them pretty flexible. And then as we moved on, one thing that we found super helpful within our team, we started using Jira, which kind of let us split up work into more of a timeline type thing and let us prioritize different tasks. And so to what Ben was saying about what is going to have the most impact, what we ended up finding ourselves doing was pick out things that aren't going to change our product 1% or like a very small amount, especially when we were just working to get new customers. We realized getting new customers and building features to new customers is going to be much more important than fixing a super minor bug that isn't going to make people leave our platform. If we have the ability to make things that will help new people join our platform. So that was kind of the balance that we looked at. It was maintain what we have and fix the bugs that need to be fixed, but at the same time, put more of an emphasis on which things will get that next customer, as long as our existing customers aren't going to leave just because of a bug or an issue that they're facing.
So at the end of the day, it always comes down to the proper prioritization.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean,
and communicating that too, especially that.
Absolutely. And to that point, I know, Ben, you mentioned that you had some pivots. I wanted to talk a little bit about that and what that experience was like, and why you pivoted and what you pivoted from into.
Sure. So I would say there's one major pivot point in our company's history, and that was about 1 to 2 years in. Our platform was completely different. I mean, not 100% completely different, but it was a completely different code base. We were doing a completely different, almost a completely different business model. We were an open source system back then, for kind of like we basically have kind of almost a website builder, like a landing page for different membership packages, which is a bit of a different way of thinking about kind of the same problem we're solving now, and completely implemented differently. And one of the reason why we pivoted at the end was it was one of those things where we all, as you said, Graham, we kind of built something before we validated it. And we really ran into this issue where like we had this great idea for something we all thought was great. We built it and then no one gave a shit. So we were like, oh shit, what do we do? And then we kept building more and more features and it wasn't working. We kept on say, oh, this feature is going to kill it. We never did it the right way, where it was like our core product just wasn't up to snuff to grow our business. So we took a step back and looked at the few customers we did have, like what were they doing with our product? And we found they were kind of using our product in a specific way where around the embeddable billing page aspect of our product. We did a lot more than just embeddable billing pages. And we said, well, let's take this one thing that customers are using and build the product out of that, just rebuild it from scratch. And that's what we did. And we've grown a ton since then. So we think it was the right decision.
Interesting. So to that point, I know both you guys have touched a little bit on being super technical and not listening enough to customers. Whenever you guys kind of transition to more listening than building, what was your strategy for getting that quality feedback? How were you reaching your customers or potential customers? How were you talking to them? How did you structure it? What was the mistakes you made while doing that? And maybe any advice you give to people who are in that stage?
So I think one of the most important things, I mean, there's two sides to this. One is the actual outreach to the customers, and two is actually having a good set of data that you can look at, that you've been gathering, of how people are actually using your product. Because when you ask somebody, how do you want to make this, what do you need to like make this app better? Like it's the whole Ford thing. Like they'll ask for faster horses sometimes. So obviously there's going to be people bringing about things to make the product better. But when it comes to actually like listening to what people have to say, I think the most important thing is the people who are paying you the most, your super users. Like just make sure that you really understand what value they're getting and figure out ways to multiply it. Because if you can do that, you can basically want to get everybody to that point. So just figuring out where they're getting stuck in the funnel, figuring out how to, optimize just different stages. I guess I kind of went on a tangent there, but yeah.
I'm here for the tangents, so don't worry about it. Graham, yourself?
Yeah, I like a lot of what Ben said at the end there of figuring out where you're losing people in the funnel. I guess we'll start with this, just in terms of full transparency. My company's kind of going through the whole pivot thing right now, and we went through that thing that Ben talked about of building a core product that just really isn't going to get the job done for what people want. And so we struggled with that for a bit of, oh, we'll just throw another feature and another feature here, but just saw that it wasn't moving the mark enough to really be the difference. So we're currently going through the pivot of figuring out back to the core, what are people really looking for? And then how can we kind of reapply our technology to actually make that? But what we did to figure out what people are actually using and all that stuff was, yes, asking people and having those conversations, super important because you can pick up way more than you would in an email, but also just judging by how they're using the product. So we went into putting up a bunch of flags where we could tell, where are we losing people in our sign up process? Where are we losing people on our site? What are they actually using? And we used those metrics to make decisions about what we should focus on. See, oh wait, why are people going through the first stage of sign up and then leaving the site? What's throwing them off? How can we change that? And that was like a pretty key part of using their actual actions to make changes versus using what one person said. Because I think another thing that can come with not having that many customers is hearing what one person has to say, making an adjustment based off that one thing that they said, and then going to a next customer and hearing a total contradiction. Unless you have things at scale where you've got like, okay, maybe 10 people giving you feedback, it gets really tough really quickly when you're just kind of going blindly almost.
That makes a ton of sense. And having that data is so valuable and being able to change those little things. And that's definitely something that we've been working on, building out our backend databases. So that way we can pull up all that information and see where people are falling off or what people are using most. And even just for me talking to early adopters and getting that valuable feedback is huge. Then I kind of want to talk about getting those first supporters and those first early testers and those early customers. Like, what does that look like for a SaaS product? Because I feel like whenever a SaaS product is first put out into the market, it's rough around the edges. You know, it's kind of like this other product, but we have this feature, it's a little bit better. But there's a couple of things that are wrong. Like, can I get your feedback? Like, what does that process look like for getting those first 10, 20, 50, 100, maybe free customers and then converting them to paying customers?
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point. You might have one feature that's a little bit better than the next guy, but you can't totally like throw all the eggs at it. There's some phrase that's like, you got to be 10 times better than a competitor for people to even notice you, especially in SaaS, just because you're a business selling to a business and they don't really have time to sit there and, I guess, waste their time giving you all this feedback, even if you're offering them something for free. It's kind of one thing that struck me, which I would not have expected, is we were offering our product to free to people, and similar products, they'd be paying maybe $500 a month, but you're almost begging them to take this for free when they're out there paying that. And that was just super surprising. Of like, when you're walking down the street, like, let's just pretend there's a normal consumer. You're walking down the street and you see a stand with t-shirts and they say, here's a free t-shirt. You don't typically turn that down. You just grab the t-shirt and keep walking. And I think that's the same way a lot of direct to consumer things work out. You just are like, okay, I'll take it. For a business, since there's so much process behind it, getting them to use a service for free and kind of switch it over. It's like, oh, I don't know if we're allowed to use this or if we have the authorization. And I don't know if Ben has dealt with this same sort of thing, but that's at least what struck me the most when it came to giving out a beta.
Yeah. So like from my experience, always, if you have like a free tier, your free users are going to be some of the worst users you've ever had. That's generally, they're the most demanding out of all the users, which is very funny because you're the one giving them free value. But I get it. Like, but I get, to get off track, to get those first users, I think there's a couple of different levers you can pull as a very early stage startup. One is you better start building your audience like ASAP, because at the end of the day, the bigger startups, like the reason second time founders generally do better than the first time founders is because they already have built up that audience from their first venture, right? So like it's such a key thing to have an audience that you can have that reach to people to give a shit about what you're putting out there, because it really feels like as an early stage startup that you're screaming into the void. Like you're literally just like posting. I mean, that's really the lever. One of the only levers you have that actually shows anything is just, having like launches on things like Product Hunt. That's always the big one, right? Where everyone says that's where you get your first users, is have a good Product Hunt launch. And it is something you can kind of game. Like you can, you make sure you have a really quality stuff that you're putting on the page. It does help to get a good hunter. It helps if you line up all your friends and family to freaking like it right when you post it, to see if it gets on the front page. So like that's what I always recommend. Like when you're ready to go, like do that product launch, but don't make that like your one and done thing. Like you should be talking about your startup before you even build it. Really, you need to be building your audience day one of like, oh, let's do a startup. You should start talking about the problem you want to solve, get people interested. Don't try and do this thing where you have to like, search for people, have already people ready to go on the wait list before you even launch. And that process needs to start, before you even like have a single line of code written is you start building that audience.
I could not agree more with that. And that's sort of what we did for getting those early adopters. We got 6,000 people to download our very 1.0 app. Super, super early. For us, what we did was we hosted events across the US, New York, Pittsburgh, DC, Chicago, LA, to build up that email list and build up that community. And what we did was we actually made a video like explaining what we were building to show to everyone who came to the events right before. Like, hey, this is what Entre is. Like, we're not just events, we're also building this whole platform and community. So that way people understood what we were actually doing instead of, oh, you're just at a networking event. And I 100% agree with that. And then I had another point as well. I lost it. That's gonna make me so mad. Oh, Hero Post is a site that I saw that did this really well. What another tactic I have seen, especially that comes to SaaS, whenever they are in that early stage, is offering like lifetime memberships, like lifetime deals, or like ridiculous like 10-year plan for like $200 or whatever their thing is. For two reasons. One, it gets people in the door testing your product for actually getting paid, because instead of them giving it to them for free, since they have put in money, it has that sunk cost fallacy where they're like, well, I threw $100 at this. I might as well use it. I might as well try it. Right. So that's been a really big part of it. And then also whenever you say, hey, this is, a social media scheduler and it's only $100 for the rest of your life. So you don't even need Hootsuite. You don't even need Buffer or whatever else there is.
I will add on to that and say you have to be very careful with that, because I have heard like success with people using AppSumo and giving those ridiculous deals and getting those early 2 customers, and that's good. But so there's a but here. You have to have a specific type of product, because AppSumo has a very specific type of audience. So your product needs to be able to fit into that. Like if you're building like a tractor repair SaaS, you don't want to be doing putting out an AppSumo deal, because the people are going to probably buy it, and then those people are going to be like, wait, I don't have a tractor, so what I don't want my money to, like, it's just like they're going to not it's a really, really absurd example, but that's kind of how it is, right? They just don't realize that they're not going to be able to use it correctly. And then they're going to start trying to get their money's worth, and it's going to be a pain in both of your asses.
Yeah, that's a good point to that. Also, once you do that with that whole lifetime thing, rather than just a monthly membership, you're kind of stuck with that idea. And then people will be complaining to get their money back if, say, you pivot out of it because you only got those first 2 customers. So you do have to be pretty confident that, hey, we'll keep this thing running, or you'll get some angry people, like what Ben said.
That's 100% true. Definitely be cautious with it if you are considering doing that as a lifetime. But definitely make sure that you're not selling tractor SaaS to people that don't want it 100%. And then the next thing I wanted to get into, it's a little bit further along in that stage, is actually your broader go-to-market and just marketing strategies for SaaS. I'm not sure if everyone else gets the same ads that I do, but I get hit with so many ads, especially on YouTube, Instagram, for so many different SaaS products all the time. So how have you guys actually been able to break through that noise and be able to get people to convert? Like, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's like, I just run up the SaaS product, I'm going to start running Facebook ads and YouTube ads or Google ads or whatever that is, any kind of paid advertising? What kind of methods have you guys seen work, maybe for yourselves or for other people?
To be quite honest, we have not really done serious paid advertisements. Most of the people find us, we have really beefed up our SEO game. And, I think that's as a early stage, very early stage startup, like if you just launched, I would be very careful with ad spend, very careful, because you have it at that early of a stage, you're going to be pivoting a lot, right? You haven't figured out anything yet. So like really understanding your messaging and understanding like the core essence of what problem you're trying to solve. And like you validated it. Once you got that product market fit, then it makes sense to start pumping money into ads. But until then, just be very careful. I would focus mainly on content, and just making sure you're like building up your audience. As I said before, like it's all kind of this thing where you're trying to get people to care about what you have to say. So like, the rule is like, I think for every, like, there's a rule where you're supposed to like put like 1 post that's promotional of your product for every 5 posts of content or something like that, because what you really need to be doing is educating people in the field. I've gone through this whole thing where you have to really figure out what stage of awareness of your product is your target audience. And this is really what to nail down content strategy is, because a given person who is your target audience will be at some stage, they'll either be aware of completely unaware of the problem you're trying to solve, but they might have the pain, right? They might be aware of the pain, but they're not sure that there's a solution. They might be aware that there's a solution, which would be a competitor. And then finally, they are aware that your product is a solution to this pain that they're feeling. So figuring out where in that stage that they are at, and then writing content to, move them up to the part where they actually give a shit who you are and understand that you are solving this specific pain is the kind of the goal of how you should write your content strategy, do your content strategy. Went on another tangent there.
So to wrap that together, you focus more on SEO instead of paid ads, and that's been a better channel for you than actually running paid ads.
Yes. Yeah. We have definitely find way more success out of just SEO and just like putting out content and through the SEO, and that's done better than any ads we put out.
Definitely a smart move. Graham, how about yourself?
Yeah. So I think kind of what Ben brought up of holding off on ads is definitely advice that I wish I'd heard before we kind of got going. And he's totally right on. So we did not hold off on doing paid advertisements because we kind of thought, oh, we'll toss in a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, and just see what happens. But first of all, just to put it out there immediately, the ads did not go that well in terms of conversion or people coming to the site, whatever the purpose was. And I guess recently, at least within the past 6 to 8 months, ads have definitely been on the downhill as of success, and they're so expensive just for clicks for the ones you want. But on top of that, if you think about any big tech companies or big companies in general, they've got a lot of the times hundreds of $1,000s of ad spends and people who sit there and do ads for a living, as in they refine campaigns, they work on content, they do all of these things, and it's their full-time job and they're making six figures to do it. So for me to come in as somebody who has very little to no experience in like Facebook or Google advertising, spending $100 or $200 with a lot of other things on my plate where it can't be a full-time job, you just can't expect that high of success when I could go to Twitter and spend 3 hours finding all the best people in the space that we are looking to target. And so in our case, we targeted a lot of Amazon sellers. So I went and found people who are, I don't know, thought leaders, kind of a bad word, but influencers in that space, reached out to a lot of them and said, hey, how can we get content up on your page? Where do you think we should go to find more people like you or people that would be interested in your stuff? And that ended up just being better overall, I guess I could say.
Definitely being scrappy is huge like that. I think especially in the early stages, like you mentioned, is bigger SaaS companies just have a lot of money to put behind ad spend. They can also pay for agencies. Being super scrappy helps a ton. And I also think it depends on like what specifically you are in SaaS. I think there's this one guy I follow on TikTok who made a Chrome extension kind of similar to Honey, where he goes on Amazon and finds a product and then will say, look, if you clicked my Chrome extension, you would know that you could get it for $40 cheaper on Best Buy, right? So even doing like social media, if you are a consumer facing SaaS product, then that's also another move. But if you're B2B, then it's a completely different game. But no, lots of value here. Absolutely loving it. And the next thing I wanted to pivot into is funding and raising money from investors. So Ben, have you raised funding?
No, we are completely bootstrapped.
Completely bootstrapped. And Graham, yourself?
Also just bootstrapped.
Got it. So I wanted to ask then, are you guys planning to stay bootstrapped, and how long do you want to plan to stay bootstrapped until you go for that fundraise?
I think the way I think about fundraising is you have to know what you're going to spend it on. Like if we were to raise right now, we haven't really figured out like a good ad strategy, so we couldn't do it on that. We could, scale up the engineering team and like build things kind of, I don't even think it would be that much faster because there's be so much downtime of like just building your org structure and just getting organized with that, really with scaling up. So like you really need to have a full game plan when you're ready to get that funding. So it's really, you want to be putting like fuel on a fire, right? That's what they say. It's like, that's the gas. So you have to just, once you like are like, holy shit, like we need liquidity, we need money right now, like to do this, and this, like that might be a sign that it's time to fundraise. And I think the strategy that we've just been playing it like just slow and steady really is kind of how we've been going at it. And we've been seeing some really good growth numbers. We were able to get the full team basically, except one member, working full time, all 5 of us, like being able to pay the bills. So that was our first kind of, goal. And then after that, now we're like, okay, so now that we've gotten ourselves like self-sustained, we don't need any funding to keep ourselves alive. Where can we put these resources? That's kind of the stage we're at now. We're trying to think like, what would scaling up look like? So that's kind of
100%. No, that's honestly an even better position to be in than to be in the position of, oh, we have 8 months of runway. We need to raise a round. now. Like being in this position where you are fully bootstrapped and didn't take any outside funding is fantastic. That's kind of like how MailChimp didn't raise any funding. They were pretty much self-funded. I think they may have taken on some debt a little bit later, if I'm not wrong, but
those founders made out like bandits.
yeah, those founders walked away with a lot of cash because they paid their employees very well, but they did not give any equity to their employees. So there's that, but they definitely did bootstrap very, very long, and played their cards right. There's a lot of companies that have done that, and I think you're in a great spot.
Yeah, the key thing for us was like making sure we all had our day jobs going and working on this when we had time. That was really it. Was like we did this as we had full-time jobs, and then we managed to. The key thing for us was being able to work remotely. We were working remotely before the pandemic, just like the whole time we were building this thing. And that I think was paramount to our success, because if we were in an office, it would be much harder to manage both things, the full-time job and the startup.
That makes a lot of sense. That's kind of how we are too. Minus myself and Michael, who are both in Pittsburgh, but the rest of our team has been entirely remote for quite a while now. And Graham, yourself, saying venture funding, are you looking to do that? Or you're just going to try and bootstrap the whole thing? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, honestly, it's really hard to say at this point. So I guess coming in, kind of like what Ben was talking about, they just worked on it when they had time, and now they've got 5 people full time, which is incredible. We do not have 5 people full time. We've got everybody not getting paid. But I guess kind of what I thought coming into it was, by 9 months from now, we'll have VCs knocking down the door and we'll be like dropping out of school with funding kind of thing. Well, that is not at all how it ended up playing out, which is it makes sense why it did not. And so to the conversation of, do we want VC funding? Right now, our biggest costs are like computing costs. And we got lucky enough to be part of Microsoft. They do an accelerator for startups, and it's no equity. And we got a large chunk of computing credits through Azure. And so that covers a lot of costs for us. And then everything else we can just bootstrap at this point. So it's hard to say when we will want to raise funding, if we want to raise funding. But yeah, I guess it is just a lot of persistence and just going for a while, like Ben said, and he's been at it a lot longer, but clearly something's working for him.
Absolutely. No, I think I support the idea of keeping yourself as bootstrapped as possible. For us, we've raised a few rounds from angels, but we haven't raised an actual official seed round. So we've really, really held off from funding. And especially another part of that too, on why doing that is so valuable, is because the longer you hold off it can be in this instance, the longer you hold off and the better that you can build out your product and have more traction to go to investors. So if you knew that you could raise a round, like Graham, let's say you were super well connected, you knew everybody in Silicon Valley, right? And you could get $1 million check tomorrow. Those terms that you're going to get that $1 million check are not going to be as good as if you bootstrap for the next 6 months and continued to build out the product and showed this growth and all this traction. Then you could leverage that to get better terms for that $1 million.
Oh yeah, that's right on. Like everybody says that, there's the big talk around, you shouldn't be building your startup just to get rich or anything like that. And while that's true, you also kind of have to think about when it comes to raising money, you've got to lawyer equity, because at the end of the day, money is one of the outcomes of a startup. Like if you go and sell, you'd like more than a couple % to yourself after your venture capitalists are paid out and then your whole team's paid out. So that's definitely in the equation when thinking about how to raise and when to raise.
Not only that, but the moment you do raise, you really become kind of on the hook for I guess the whims of the investors to some extent. It's a lot of responsibility that if you're trying to just like grow this thing it depends on how ambitious you are with the company, I guess, because the investors are looking for, 100x return on their investment or a 10x or some ridiculous amount in some sort of time frame.
Yeah. It also, I think it rushes you too. Like you can't sit there and slowly build out a product, build out a good audience and do all of that. Because once you have money on the table, it's expected to be spent and you got to go do ads or build up an artificial audience even to hit that 10x mark in those few years.
Once you bring on investors, then you're more indirectly working for somebody else. I wouldn't say as direct, because I feel like you're still an entrepreneur, but you still are reporting to your investors or your board or whatever, however you end up structuring that out. So no, it definitely changes the bigger you get and the further you scale. So definitely I like what you guys are both doing, trying to keeping yourselves bootstrapped as possible. That's 100% the way to do it. And also like what Graham had mentioned, going through those non-equity accelerator programs are absolutely huge. Is there anything else that you learned from that program that was super valuable? If you want to touch on that real quick, Graham.
Yeah, I think, well, so part of it's like motivation for why people are giving you non-equity help, I guess. And so for them, the motivation is they're trying to get companies onto Azure to build on top of it. And you always got to think, where would the typical company go? Why is Azure giving their credits away? Like you go and look at Fire or like Amazon Web Services, they don't really need to give away all that many credits because people are coming to Amazon Web Services and spending a lot of money. In all honesty, we've had a lot of problems with Azure just because it's less documented and is not as well built out. But I mean, that's the price. But yeah, I think also pitch competitions. I know Entre is hosting one soon, but that's one that has helped us where we've got a good idea and we've got enthusiastic people. Why don't we just go pitch? And if that means we make a couple thousand here or there, that's a win in my book when we're running on like when we're bootstrapping. So why not?
Well, ours is still open for both of you guys. So literally the only thing that's holding you back is if you're making too much revenue or if you are too far venture funded. So if you do, you just click create, click pitch, then you guys can actually submit your pitch if you want to be a part of this month through November. So it's October through November, but we started a little bit early into September. So if you guys want to be a part of the first round, just click create, then click pitch, and I'd love to see it.
So is that pitching, you said that it's through November, so you could pitch like end of October?
So you would upload your pitch and it would be live on the feed. The top 5 most uploaded pitches on the pitch feed get to pitch at the pitch competition.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like Product Hunt and Shark Tank put together.
Yeah. Okay. I'll definitely check that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're super excited about it. So yeah, that's kind of what we've got cooking on that end. And then we've got about 15 minutes left. I wanted to ask one more question. And then if anyone in the audience does have a question and wants to come up on stage, you hit the little raise hand button down at the bottom, and then I can bring you on up. But the question I wanted to ask is like, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing? And what advice would you give to your past self before you had started your companies? What is that thing that you wish you would have known day 1, day 2, or that first 6 months or wherever that is in that early onset? What kind of stuff do you wish that you knew?
You go for it. I saw you on mute.
Okay, I can do it. So I know the second question was, what would I ask myself? What was the first question was, what's the biggest problems I'm currently facing?
I would say just general. I'd say currently / like you have faced, and then like what advice would you give to yourself as a whole, like in the past?
Yeah, I think our biggest problem still is figuring out the right type of marketing. I think it's just been an ongoing process from us, like, picking up the marketing chops from being a very technical crew. And I think if I were to, go back and talk to my past self, I would say, make sure you validate things before you build anything, because we went down a huge rabbit hole that lasted us over a year of just building shit without having anything validated in a meaningful way. So
Yeah, I'm gonna say kind of the same thing a little bit, but I'll kind of take a roundabout way to get there. So over the summer, I read The Lean Startup, which is a super common book. I'm sure half of you have read it, but it really resonated with me at the time that I read it, because that's when we were realizing that we kind of built a product that was not being used in any meaningful way with any meaningful numbers. And it all just came as, well, it looks like we did not hear enough from our customers originally to really build what they wanted, honestly. And so the biggest struggle that we've faced, and we're working to kind of get out of that, is not listening enough. And so right now, kind of the pivot that we're going through is taking the technology that we have that we were facing towards consumers, to like e-commerce companies, and facing it more towards general consumers who want to figure out if they're buying the right things on Amazon. Because it ended up being an adverse use of our product where us as founders would use it, or all of our friends would say, hey, can you go check out this product and tell me if we should buy it? And so we're working to hear a lot from people that we think would use our product. And the emphasis is on think, because we thought that people would use our last product, which did not end up being the case. So that's the biggest thing that, like, as going from that first time to how I would be as a founder now on, would be just stop coding for a bit and just chill out on that. Hear what people have to say about your product and genuinely take in that feedback, because you'll be a lot more satisfied and motivated when you've got 100 people on a product that they feel like they had an impact in making, than no people where you were the only one making decisions on how that product should be made.
I could not agree more. So much value here. I think definitely what we touched a lot on today was the importance of that feedback, iterating, pivoting, and making sure you're actually providing value for those customers. And that's definitely something that we're working on here ourselves, trying to make sure that we're not just building new features to build new features. We're finding things that people actually want, and finding people that are actually using specific features, whether that be rooms, or that's a pitch feed, or that's jobs, whatever that is, trying to find ways to serve them best. So I couldn't agree more with all the value that's coming out of here. We've got about 10 minutes left. If anyone here in the audience has a question for our awesome founders, Graham and Ben, you can click the little raise hand button. If not, I'm trying to think of, we've covered a lot. Founding. Trying to think, do you guys have any questions for each other out of curiosity?
I've got a question for you, Ben.
let's shoot.
All right. So you talked about that year of pivoting, I guess, going from, or not the year of pivoting, but the year of kind of just screwing around and building things that nobody cared about. I want to know how your team shifted, because I know for us, one thing that was kind of a struggle is we built out a product, and then the people that we thought were going to use it did not use it, and not a lot of people used it. It's not super motivating, and it can cause people to be either really disappointed or lose track of why they kind of joined the company in the first place. So how did your team change? Did everybody stick around and say, you know what, we screwed up this first time, let's make something better? Or did people just get demotivated and want to say, throw in the towel there?
I don't think there was ever a point where we ever wanted to really throw in the towel. I think it was because we were doing this. Part of the reason was, I think maybe different, was like, we all had full-time jobs while we were building this thing. This was always like us as a team. Like, this was something that we were doing, like we were very passionate about, and we were, doing it whenever we had time from our main job. Like, there'd be days where I had it set up where I was like spending more time on my startup than my full-time job. But that's beside the point. I think what happened was we were still like slowly growing a little bit, nothing like major. We had a couple of people like paying, I think we had maybe 10 to 15 paying customers by the time we did that pivot, but of course, it's like extremely demotivating, like having things not work out. And I think we just kept telling ourselves we had this vision of like building this awesome company and doing this just solving this specific problem. It kept us going, and just like, we knew if we kept at it long enough that we would figure something out. And I think we all kind of had this mutual understanding that like, this is just something we're just going to work on until we figure it out. It was there almost a grind mentality. And then I think the trigger for us of like, when we decided we were going to pivot, it was actually me. I was working on the application, and part of the big frustration was we had this like split thing where we had an open source version of our application and we had a paid version of it that had more features, and like developing it in a way that open source worked was a pain in the ass. We kept on adding more features, more complexity. And it was like, I sat down and I like looked at what we built. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like this thing is so freaking complicated, and it's such a pain in the ass to just do anything to it. And then I was like, I told our co-founder, and then we were like, like, thing people are really using is like this thing. So let's just start from scratch and do just that. And that's kind of where it started. Hope that helps.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. Did you ever have any people within the team that started that just left along the way? Or was it really?
We were lucky enough to not have that issue. So we have basically the original founding team. We haven't really added or removed anybody.
Cool. That's awesome.
That's definitely a really good feeling. It's never easy having people leave, or worse, having to remove somebody. But it looks like, and Ben, do you have any questions for Graham?
I guess I would like to hear what you're pivoting from and pivoting to.
Sure. Yeah. So this is, I'll be honest, I tried to avoid it a little bit because we're supposed to be talking about SaaS, but this is a little bit a difference. So we are really good at, like, our product is good at taking in a lot of reviews. So what we do is we go to Amazon, pull a bunch of reviews from a product, and kind of analyze what people are talking about in those reviews at scale. So we can go like what 5,000 people are saying within reviews versus going and reading 2 comments. And so what we focused on towards e-commerce companies was, hey, rather than hiring someone to go read through all of your reviews, pay us $20 a month or whatever it is, and we'll do it all for you and give you actual actionable feedback on how to improve your product. And so people didn't end up doing that. But what was happening is we tell people, our friends and family and all that stuff, what we're building. And so we could pretty much tell them, hey, this is a good product or this isn't a good product. And so they'd be sending us links because that's all it took. They'd send us an Amazon link and say, should I buy this? I'm looking for a projector, or I'm looking for a new pair of sunglasses. What do people think about this? And so we kind of took that and realized, well, we aren't getting all the traction we want with where we're targeting right now. Why don't we go and build something that not only we will use, but we know people are going to, or we at least think people are going to use it. So we're pivoting to a browser extension type thing where you go and install the browser extension. And if you stumble across a product on Amazon that we have analyzed the reviews for, up pops the browser extension, gives you some analytics on, hey, here's what people have thought about the product over time. Maybe it has a positive or negative trend. Pull out words that are generally associated with that product. So maybe people think that it's cheap or it's overhyped or something like that. We can kind of show you those things and then give you kind of an overall, should this be something you buy? And if it is, then you can do your own research on top of that. But if it says don't buy, I personally don't want to waste my time reading reviews for something that is a don't buy. So I'd move on. And so to my point of building before writing code, what we're working on right now is making all the mockups that we want our browser extension to look like, kind of redoing all of our landing page and that kind of stuff. And then we're going to do a product launch and just, or a product hunt launch and just things like that to kind of feel out if people are looking for it. And if they are, then we'll build it and pull people into our beta and kind of take the route of really working off of feedback. And if it's not something people want, then we haven't wasted our time and we can go on to the next idea using our technology.
I love that. That's the best way to do it, is validate that people actually will give a shit about what you're putting out there.
Yeah. So if anybody has some feedback on that, I'll obviously take it. Or if you want,
I might have missed it. What's your monetization model? Is it affiliate codes or something?
yeah. So that's what we're starting with and kind of shaking out a better way to go about it. I know affiliate codes works for a lot of companies, at least in the beginning, but long term, you're not going to pull huge amounts of revenue from that. So that is still the question mark on the table that we're working on.
Absolutely amazing. If there's any way I can give both of you guys customer feedback, please let me know. I'm happy to hop on a one-on-one. I know me and Graham had one a couple months ago. I'm definitely happy to help any way I can. And if I know anyone who does Amazon FBA, I'll send them your way as well, for sure.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, and to that point, also, if you guys want to be listed on Entre Pro, let me know. We can definitely set that up. If you guys want to offer a deal or discount to the community, I think that could be huge for helping with some user acquisition.
Cool. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be nice. We can talk later, man.
Absolutely. Well, gents, I appreciate both of you guys coming up. We're coming up on the hour here. I know you guys have got some other stuff going on, especially because we're founders. You got a bunch of stuff. Always the to-do list just never, just never. Bigger. Yeah, I just, even like a day where you accomplish a lot, it somehow just ends up getting bigger. So I appreciate
to do more stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate you guys taking an hour of your day to come hang out with me and the rest of the community. Definitely let me know if there's any way I can help, or the rest of the Entre team. Always happy to support. And yeah, you guys have any last words for everyone else who's listening? Anything else to end on?
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah, I just gotta say thanks for listening and taking what we had to say. And then also, if you guys want to go, I don't know, follow along on what we're building or learn about the browser extension, you can always find me on Twitter or something like that.
Got it. Awesome. Much appreciated. Definitely keep building in public. Thank you guys so much for listening in, and have a great rest of your day. For Graham, because it's still kind of early for you, it's like 5. And everybody, you guys, Grant Ben's in California, so
We're 6, yeah.
yeah.
Early.
It's
Not late yet.
yeah, it's getting a little late for me. So, but we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and yeah, have a good one, everybody.
All right. Thank you guys. Good to meet you, Doug.
Good to meet you too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of GenZ Talks. Make sure to connect with me and thousands of other entrepreneurs, investors, and creators over at joinentre.com, or you can download our mobile app for both iOS and Android. Also, don't forget to follow us on social at Join Entre.